The courthouse waiting room smelled faintly of old carpet and overbrewed coffee, sterile, still, and far too quiet for Lydia's rattling nerves. She sat rigid in a molded plastic chair, her palms flat against the manila folder resting on her lap. Inside, color printouts of invoices, bank statements, signed contracts, and a carefully designed summary of her annual income. It was her entire professional identity distilled into a handful of pages. Across the room, Daniel adjusted the cuffs of his tailored navy suit. He didn't look at her. He hadn't since she walked in, though she could feel the hum of his judgment radiating across the space like static. His lawyer, a younger man with slicked back hair and a perpetual smirk, whispered something into Daniel's ear, prompting a chuckle. Lydia's jaw tensed. She turned her eyes to the floor, willing her pulse to slow. This wasn't supposed to be war. She had convinced herself, when the custody hearings were first scheduled, that reason would prevail. That her devotion to Emma, every soccer practice, every art show, every late-night stomach bug, would count for more than her tax bracket. But Daniel's legal team had other plans. They painted her as unstable, unreliable, a woman chasing artistic whims on the internet while their daughter needed structure. A mother who, despite living in a charming two-bedroom in Northeast Portland and providing everything Emma needed, didn't have a real job. Lydia had stared at those words in the affidavit like they were in a foreign language. Unreal job. As if the 12-hour editing sessions, the endless client negotiations, the digital commissions and gallery deadlines, were some elaborate delusion. She earned more now than she ever had working office jobs in her 20s and 30s, but it didn't matter to them. She reached for her phone. A picture of Emma greeted her, wide brown eyes, a toothy smile, her head thrown back in laughter. Lydia blinked back, a sudden sting of tears. The bailiff's voice echoed from the doorway. Whitmore versus Lane. Courtroom 4B. Lydia stood slowly, legs tight with anxiety. Her black blazer was too warm, her blouse clung at the underarms. She followed behind Daniel and his attorney, clutching the folder like a shield. Each step down the corridor seemed louder than the last. The courtroom was stark, tall wooden panels, a high bench, the judge's seat still empty. Lydia took her place at the petitioner's table. Her lawyer, Angela, gave her a brief nod of reassurance, then began arranging their papers. Daniel, already seated beside his counsel, leaned back like he was in a boardroom. His body language said everything. This was his arena. The judge entered. A tall woman in her 60s, with silver hair in a tight bun and reading glasses low on her nose. She introduced herself, flipped through the file before her, and cleared her throat. We're here to assess the custody arrangement for minor Emma Whitmore, she began, then paused, eyes scanning the file again. Ms. Lane, I see you're self-employed, as a digital artist? Lydia nodded. Yes, Your Honor. The judge gave a brief smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. That's an unconventional path. I imagine it's more of a passion than a profession? Lydia opened her mouth, stunned, but no words came. The air in the courtroom turned heavy. Daniel shifted, just enough for Lydia to see the corner of his mouth twitch, a barely concealed smirk. Angela leaned forward. Your Honor, if I may, but the judge was already moving on. We'll examine your income statements shortly. Let's begin with testimony. Lydia's hands trembled slightly as she opened her folder. The room had already judged her. And she hadn't even spoken yet. She glanced at Daniel. He sat cool and unbothered, the corners of his mouth set in smug confidence, but Lydia knew something he didn't. What she lacked in courtroom polish, she had in hard-earned truth, and soon, those papers in her lap would speak louder than his entire team ever could. Angela's voice was calm but deliberate as she stepped to the front of the courtroom. Your Honor, with the court's permission, I'd like to submit Exhibit A, a financial summary of Ms. Lane's earnings over the past 3 fiscal years, including 1099s, PayPal and Stripe deposit records, and verified bank statements. The judge glanced over her glasses, skeptical, but motioned for the bailiff to retrieve the folder. Lydia held her breath as her neatly organized documents changed hands. There was no fanfare, no dramatic moment, just the soft slap of paper against a desk. I'd also like to note that Ms. Lane's income for 2023 exceeded $130,000. With a projected increase of 15% for 2024, Angela added, her tone still measured. Daniel shifted in his chair. Lydia couldn't stop watching the judge's expression. Her brow furrowed slightly as she turned the pages. She lingered on the monthly invoice totals, the art licensing agreement with a national apparel brand, and a social media contract worth nearly $25,000. The judge looked up. Ms. Lane, would you explain a bit more about what you do? These figures are higher than I expected. Lydia stood slowly, knees stiff. Yes, Your Honor. I create custom digital illustrations for private clients, portraits, concept art, branding. I also license my work to companies for marketing and merchandise. I have consistent contracts, an LLC, and I work full-time from my home studio. The judge raised an eyebrow. Do you have employees? No, but I outsource some administrative work, bookkeeping, some web management. Everything else I handle myself. Daniel's lawyer interjected. Your Honor, with respect, while Ms. Lane's earnings may appear stable now, freelance work is inherently volatile. There's no guarantee these figures will hold, nor that the digital art market will continue to be viable. Angela didn't miss a beat. If the court is concerned about volatility, I'd point out that Mr. Whitmore has changed firms twice in the last 5 years, and one of those moves involved a significant pay cut. Daniel stiffened. Angela continued. Stability isn't just about income. It's about emotional consistency, daily presence, and support. Ms. Lane has been Emma's primary caregiver since birth. Mr. Whitmore travels frequently and, as emails. In our submission show, often delegates parenting responsibilities to nannies or extended family. The judge nodded slowly, her fingers tapping the desk. Daniel cleared his throat. Your Honor, I'd like to speak. Go ahead, Mr. Whitmore. He stood confidently, his voice smooth. I don't dispute that Ms. Lane loves our daughter. But I believe Emma needs structure, not late nights while her mother finishes drawings or inconsistent schedules. She needs someone with a defined workday, not a person whose income depends on internet trends. Lydia's fists clenched at her sides. She wanted to scream, but Angela's hand gently brushed her arm, a silent reminder to stay calm. Instead, she spoke clearly. Your Honor, I may not have a traditional 9 to 5, but Emma has never missed a meal, a checkup, or a homework assignment. I work late sometimes, yes, but it means I'm home when she comes back from school. I pack her lunches. I help with her projects. I talk her through her fears. Her voice caught, but she kept going. I know my job doesn't look like his. But it's not a hobby. And it doesn't make me any less of a mother. The courtroom was quiet. The judge looked down at the earnings summary again. $130,000, and you've been consistently bringing in above 6 figures for how long? 3 years, Lydia said. Before that, it was growing year by year. The judge tapped her pen. All right, let's proceed with Ms. Lane's testimony. As she sat back down, Lydia exhaled for what felt like the first time all morning. Her hands still shook, but there was steel in her spine now. The judge hadn't said much, not yet. But something in her tone had shifted. She glanced at Daniel. His smile had vanished. Outside, through the narrow windows, clouds drifted lazily over Portland's skyline. Rain threatened, but for the first time in a long while, Lydia didn't mind. Lydia sat straighter in her chair as the court clerk called for a recess. 15 minutes. Enough time to breathe, maybe sip lukewarm water from the cooler by the hallway, but not enough to settle the nerves buzzing beneath her skin. Angela leaned in, voice low. You're doing fine. She's listening. Lydia gave a small nod, her eyes trained on the judge's bench, now empty. Her throat felt dry, her back tight. Emma's name kept echoing in her thoughts. This wasn't about proving herself to Daniel. Or to the court. It was about protecting the only person who mattered. She stood and stepped into the hallway. The gray tile floor clicked under her flats. Daniel was already out there, talking on his phone. He paced slowly, his voice hushed but urgent. She's framing herself as the underdog, he muttered. It's playing well. I don't think the judge expected her to be articulate or organized. Lydia froze. He hadn't seen her daughter pause. Then, yeah, I know I said she'd fall apart. She's not. And that stupid portfolio looks professional. He turned slightly, and their eyes met. He hung up without a word and walked past her without breaking stride. Back in the courtroom. The judge reappeared, and proceedings resumed with Lydia on the witness stand. The court stenographer adjusted her keyboard. Angela stood nearby, posture calm and assertive. The judge gestured to Daniel's lawyer. Mr. Hallberg, you may proceed with your cross-examination. Lydia swallowed hard. Hallberg approached with a thin, polite smile. Ms. Lane, let's talk about your work schedule. I work roughly 35 to 45 hours a week, she said. From home? Yes. And how do you manage distractions, say, if your daughter is sick or home from school? I manage my schedule around her needs. That's one of the benefits of my setup, flexibility. I've never missed a deadline. Hallberg smiled wider, as if her answer confirmed something for him. But it does suggest that your home is both a workplace and a family space. Would you say that's ideal for a child? Lydia blinked. I would say that Emma has always had stability, and a mother who's present. He nodded, pretending to scribble something. Now, about your income. You submitted records from PayPal, Stripe, and a few corporate contracts. But some of these clients, how reliable are they? Couldn't one or two decide to stop working with you tomorrow? Like any business, she said slowly, there are fluctuations. But I have over 60 active clients, and my portfolio grows. Every year. I've saved, invested, and diversified my work. This isn't a side gig. It's a career. Hallberg tapped his pen. But no health benefits? No retirement plan through an employer? I purchase my own health insurance, she replied. And I contribute to a Roth IRA. He hesitated, then glanced at Daniel before trying again. Would you agree, Ms. Lane, that a 12-year-old girl might benefit from a more traditional environment, one where the parent doesn't work from the same room she plays in? Angela objected. Speculative and subjective. Sustained, the judge said. Hallberg gave a polite bow of the head and stepped back. No further questions. Lydia remained still as Angela returned to the podium. Ms. Lane, she began. Gently, how would you describe your daughter's life with you? Lydia took a breath. Full. Safe. Creative. We bake together. We talk about school and her friends. She paints beside me when I work. I built a workspace in our spare room, just for me. Emma knows when the door is closed, I'm working. She respects that. But she also knows I'm there. Always. The judge nodded once, scribbled something in her notes, then said, Thank you, Ms. Lane. You may step down. Lydia returned to her seat, her legs numb but steady. She didn't look at Daniel. She didn't need to. She could feel the air between them cooling. His certainty was cracking. The judge cleared her throat. Next, we'll hear testimony from the child advocate assigned to Emma Whitmore. Ms. Franklin, please approach. As the advocate took the stand, Lydia gripped the edge of the table. This would be the most telling moment. Someone who had spoken to Emma, who had sat across from her daughter and seen what Lydia saw every day, was about to speak. The courtroom, once full of whispered doubt, now waited in silence. The child advocate, Karen Franklin, was a middle-aged woman with short silver hair and clear, direct eyes. She wore a charcoal gray blazer over a plain blouse, and as she took the oath and settled into the witness chair, she glanced briefly at Lydia, not with sympathy, but with calm acknowledgement. Angela stood. Miss Franklin, can you tell the court about your role in this case? Certainly. I was appointed to evaluate the living environments, emotional dynamics, and overall welfare of the child, Emma Whitmore. I conducted home visits with both parents, interviewed Emma in private, and reviewed documents pertaining to her education, health, and well-being. The judge nodded. Please proceed with your findings. Karen folded her hands neatly. Emma is a bright, articulate 12-year-old. She expressed love for both parents, though she clearly associates emotional safety and freedom with her mother. Lydia felt her throat close. She didn't dare glance at Daniel. She described her mother as someone who always listens, even when she's tired. She mentioned that their house is small but cozy, and that she enjoys doing art alongside her mother. Emma also said she knows her mom works hard, even if the job doesn't look like what some people expect. The courtroom was still. Even Daniel had stopped fidgeting. Karen continued. When I asked Emma how she felt about the possibility of spending more time with her father, her words were, I love Dad, but he's always on his phone or leaving. He's serious a lot. It's kind of like a hotel when I'm there, nice, but not home. Lydia closed her eyes briefly, absorbing the ache and truth of those words. Miss Franklin, Hallberg cut in, isn't it common for children to favor the more permissive parent? Ms. Lane works from home, likely allows more flexibility. Karen's voice was firm. That's not what I observed. Ms. Lane maintains clear boundaries, Emma's bedtime, screen limits, homework routine, all consistent. Her discipline. Style is gentle but effective. Emma respects her. She feels heard. The judge interjected. And Mr. Whitmore's household? Structured, polished, well-resourced, Karen replied. However, Emma seemed distant there. I asked her what she enjoyed most about her time at her father's. Her answer was, quote, when we order takeout and watch movies, but that doesn't happen often. She said most evenings he worked late, and she spent time alone or with house staff. Daniel shifted. That's not unusual for a professional. The judge held up a hand. You'll have your chance, Mr. Whitmore. Karen went on. I found no signs of neglect or danger in either home. But emotional presence matters as much as financial provision. Emma feels seen and supported in her mother's care. That weighs heavily in my recommendation. Angela asked gently, and what is your recommendation? Karen didn't hesitate. That primary custody remain with Ms. Lane, with a modified visitation schedule for Mr. Whitmore. Emma's emotional stability is stronger in her mother's home. I believe disrupting that could cause her significant distress. Lydia's breath caught. Her hands trembled slightly on her lap, but she kept them still. The judge wrote something without looking up. Then she nodded to Karen. Thank you, Ms. Franklin. You may step down. As the child advocate returned to her seat, Daniel leaned in toward Hallberg, whispering sharply. Angela leaned over to Lydia and murmured, "That went as well as we could have hoped." But Lydia's mind was a storm, not just of relief, but of memories. Of all the times she'd questioned herself, was it enough? Was she enough? She had spent nights staring at the ceiling, wondering if her quiet, artistic life, lived outside the structures people trusted, would ever be seen as legitimate. And now, the one voice that mattered most, Emma's, had pierced through the noise. The judge spoke. "We'll reconvene tomorrow for closing arguments. Until then, court is adjourned." The gavel fell. Lydia stood slowly, the blood rushing back into her legs. As people filed out of the courtroom, she caught Daniel's eye for the first time. That day, there was no smugness left, just a flicker of something he rarely showed, doubt. Outside, the Portland sky had turned a soft gray, but the light felt warmer. Lydia stepped out into it, her arms wrapped tight around the manila folder that, for the first time, felt less like a shield and more like a statement. Tomorrow, she would finish telling her story. And this time, they would listen. The courthouse steps were slick with a fine mist by the time Lydia emerged. Rain clung to her hair in soft droplets, but she didn't raise her umbrella. She didn't even notice. Her mind was still in the courtroom. Emma's words, Karen. Franklin's unwavering tone, the judge's neutral but attentive expression. It replayed like a film loop, slow and vivid. Angela stepped beside her, flipping through her notes. "We'll keep it short tomorrow. Summarize, reinforce the financials, and focus on Emma's well-being. Don't get emotional. You've already won the heart, now we need the head." Lydia nodded, but her thoughts were elsewhere. "I'm heading back to the office," Angela added. "Get some rest, Lydia. Tomorrow is just the ribbon." Lydia offered a thin smile. "Thanks. For everything." As the attorney walked off, Lydia lingered, staring out at the city, rain falling steadily on the streets, headlights smeared across wet pavement, distant sirens muffled by mist. Portland pulsed on, unaware of the weight inside her chest. She checked her phone. A single message waited from Emma. "Hey Mom, how did it go today?" Lydia stared at the screen for a long time before typing. "We're doing okay, baby. I'll tell you more tomorrow. I love you so much." The response came almost instantly. "Love you too. Always." She exhaled shakily, tucked the phone into her coat, and headed for the bus stop. The apartment smelled like vanilla and pencil shavings, Emma's scent, embedded in every blanket and crevice. Lydia dropped her bag by the door, kicked off her flats, and moved into the kitchen. The fridge was nearly empty. She hadn't grocery shopped in days, but there was frozen soup in the back of the freezer, a batch she'd made with Emma 2 weeks earlier on a rainy Sunday. She heated it slowly on the stove, the gentle bubbling a small comfort. Her workspace in the spare room beckoned. Unfinished commissions waited on her drawing tablet. She should work, deadlines loomed, but the fatigue in her bones told her otherwise. Instead, she pulled out a sketchbook. Not for clients. Not for money. Just her and paper. She drew Emma, eyes bright, mouth open mid-laugh, a smudge of watercolor streaking her cheek, a memory from a morning painting session gone awry. Lydia smiled as the pencil glided over the page, effortless, like breathing. Her phone buzzed again, a different tone. This time, the name made her stomach turn. Daniel. She hesitated before opening the message. "Can we talk tomorrow after court? Just the two of us. No punctuation. No explanation." She stared at it, then set the phone face down and returned to her sketch. Morning came too soon. The courthouse lobby was quieter than before. Lydia arrived early, dressed in the same black blazer, clean lines, simple earrings. No makeup beyond mascara. She wanted to be seen clearly, not decorated. Daniel was already there, alone. No lawyer. He stood near the window, gazing out. When he saw her, he straightened. "Lydia," he said. She nodded. "Daniel." He motioned to an empty bench along the wall. "Just for a minute?" She hesitated, then followed. "I wasn't expecting what happened yesterday," he said after a pause. "Emma's perception. The way she sees things. It caught me off guard." Lydia kept her hands folded in her lap. "She's honest." "She is." He shifted. "And I owe you an apology. About the job comment. About all of it." She didn't reply. He added, "You've built something real. I didn't get it before. I do now." Still, she said nothing. After a moment, he looked at her with a trace of something unfamiliar. Vulnerability. "I'm not going to contest custody anymore." Lydia blinked. "What?" "You can tell the judge. I'll still ask for my regular visitation, but I won't push for primary. It's clear where she's happiest. Where she belongs." Lydia's heart thudded, but she kept her voice steady. "Why now?" Daniel exhaled. "Because I saw the way Emma talked about you. Because your lawyer embarrassed the hell out of me. Because, maybe I needed to lose to realize what mattered." Lydia turned to look at him. For the first time in years, she saw not the man who left her, not the man who condescended to her. But a father trying, awkwardly, to do something right. Thank you, she said finally. He nodded, stood, and walked away. She sat still for a long while, the silence around her humming with things unsaid. Tomorrow still held a verdict. But today? Today held peace. The courtroom was cooler than usual. Lydia sat alone at her table, her manila folder unopened beside her. She didn't need to reference it anymore. Everything she needed to prove had already been spoken, not just by her, but by Emma. By Karen Franklin, even, in his own way, by Daniel. He entered a few minutes later, his steps slower than before. He nodded to her briefly as he sat beside his lawyer, who looked at him curiously. Daniel said something low, and the lawyer frowned but said nothing more. Angela leaned over to Lydia. You look calm. I feel calm, Lydia said, surprised by how true it sounded. The judge entered promptly at 9. Her robe swayed slightly as she settled at the bench. She reviewed a few documents before addressing the room. This court has reviewed testimony, financial records, character assessments, and the child advocate's recommendation, she began, voice measured and clear. Lydia gripped the edge of the table, but not in fear this time. In readiness, I want to begin by acknowledging both parties. Mr. Whitmore, your home is structured and secure. Your commitment to your daughter is not in question. However, she paused, turning her gaze. Ms. Lane has demonstrated consistent, stable caregiving, a deep emotional connection with the child, and a surprising degree of professional and financial stability given the unconventional nature of her work. Lydia felt her breath catch. The judge continued, it is not this court's place to define what constitutes a real job in the modern economy. What matters is capability, consistency, and character. Ms. Lane possesses all 3. A hush fell over the room. Therefore, primary physical and legal custody will remain with Ms. Lane, with a revised visitation schedule for Mr. Whitmore that includes expanded summer and holiday time, contingent upon mutual agreement. Lydia's eyes filled, but she held them open, blinking against the blur. Daniel exhaled and said quietly, it's okay. The judge added, this ruling is based on the best interest of the child, and I encourage both parents to continue fostering a collaborative relationship moving forward. She banged the gavel. Court adjourned. Outside, the rain had finally stopped. Portland's clouds had broken into thin streaks of light gray, and sunlight began to seep through in scattered beams. Lydia stepped into the light slowly, like it might vanish. Angela touched her shoulder. You did it. I didn't think I'd feel this. What? Seen, Lydia said. Angela smiled. It's a good look on you. Daniel approached a moment later, his briefcase in hand, but no lawyer beside him. I meant what I said. If Emma wants to visit more often, she can. I won't fight you anymore. Lydia nodded. She'll appreciate that. So will I. He looked away, then back. You're better at this than I thought. Being a mother, she asked. No, he said. Being everything. He walked off, and this time, Lydia didn't feel small watching him leave. She felt full. That night, Emma ran into her arms the moment Lydia opened the apartment door. No questions. No hesitation. Just warmth, and familiarity, and the scent of home. They sat on the couch with bowls of mac and cheese, sketchbooks in their laps. What do you want to draw tonight? Lydia asked. Emma tapped her pencil against her chin. A storm. But with a rainbow hiding in it. Lydia laughed. That's very poetic. Emma shrugged. You always say the good stuff happens after it rains. Lydia pulled her close. Then, we're in the good part now. And for the first time in a long time, she believed it. 2 weeks passed, and life settled back into its familiar rhythm, not because things had returned to what they were, but because Lydia had learned how to carry the weight differently. She sat at her desk one Monday morning, the sun cutting gentle shadows across her drawing tablet. Outside, Portland yawned awake, coffee carts steaming, bicycles zipping by, and the slow hum of a city that understood the value of quiet mornings. Emma was at school. Lydia had just dropped her off, and they'd talked about their new weekend project, painting a mural in the living room. Emma wanted something with stars and waves. Like dreams crashing into the moon, she had said, all seriousness and no irony. Now, Lydia scrolled through her inbox, a mug of chamomile tea in hand. 3 new commissions had come in overnight, one from a local publishing house asking for cover art, another from a high-profile food blogger seeking character illustrations for a children's series, and the third, surprisingly, from a nonprofit looking to brand a mental health campaign. She opened the third email and paused at the subject line. We saw your piece on digital motherhood, would love to collaborate. It took her a second to place it. Digital motherhood was an article she'd written nearly a year ago, a raw, late-night essay she'd posted on her portfolio blog. It wasn't technical or promotional. Just a reflection on balancing art, work, and raising Emma as a solo parent. She had almost deleted it. Now someone had not only read it, but been moved enough to reach out. She started typing a reply, then stopped. Instead, she opened a blank canvas, lines flowed. First, a mother's figure. Tired but upright, arms extended not in surrender, but in strength. Then, around her, bursts of color, Emma's colors. Bright blue, sunflower yellow, coral pink. Small hands tucked into large ones. A house that didn't tower but radiated light. She didn't think about technique or symmetry. She just let it happen. Art had always been how she made sense of herself, long before the clients, the courtroom, or the title of freelance professional. Back when it was crayons on tablecloths, and later, sketchbooks filled with images she never showed anyone, and back when Daniel used to say, "You're talented, but this isn't a plan." Now it was the plan. And it was working. That evening, Emma walked in and tossed her backpack onto the couch. "Mom," she called, "guess what?" "What?" "I got picked to paint a panel for the school's spring mural. They said I had a strong sense of emotional expression." She grinned. "Isn't that a fancy way of saying, I feel too many things?" Lydia laughed. "It's the best compliment you could get." Emma plopped down beside her at the kitchen table. "Can you help me practice? I want it to be, you know." Good. "I'd love to." They set up side-by-side sketchbooks, as they always had. But this time, Lydia saw something different in her daughter, not just talent or imagination, but confidence. Emma wasn't drawing to please anyone. She was drawing to say something. That night, after Emma went to bed, Lydia sat on the balcony, sipping tea under a sky washed clean by afternoon rain. Her phone buzzed again, a new message from a former client turned friend. "Hey, just saw your testimony clip on TikTok. It's making the rounds. You're inspiring people. Artists. Moms. All of us." Lydia blinked, surprised. She hadn't known anyone was filming. But someone must have posted a clip from the courtroom. The moment she stood and said, "It's not a hobby. And it doesn't make me any less of a mother." It had felt terrifying then, and now, it felt like truth. She replied with a simple line, "Thanks." It wasn't about going viral. It was about being visible. She put her phone down and leaned back, her eyes tracing the constellations just beginning to pierce the sky. No gavel could define her worth. No title. No suit. No courtroom. She had built something real, not just a business, but a life. Not just income, but influence, and most of all, she'd given her daughter the blueprint to believe in herself, even when the world told her not to. A month had passed since the verdict, and Lydia found herself invited to things she'd never imagined: panels, webinars, podcasts. She declined most. Not because she wasn't honored, but because the silence of her studio, the hum of a stylus on glass, and the sound of Emma humming from the next room still felt like the most meaningful place to be. But one invitation stood out: Portland Creators Collective, keynote panel, "The New Normal, Creative Women Redefining Success." Angela had forwarded the invite with a note: "You should say yes. This is bigger than you." At first, Lydia laughed. But as the days went by, she realized something. This wasn't about standing on a stage to prove herself anymore. That battle was over. This was about reaching someone else who might be sitting in her shoes, unsure if their quiet, untraditional path counted as real. So she said yes. The event was held at a local art center, modern but intimate, exposed brick, soft lighting, folding chairs arranged around a small platform. Lydia wore jeans and a crisp blouse, her hair in a low bun, no frills. The way she always dressed when she meant to be fully herself. She sat between two other speakers, a former teacher turned comic artist, and a single father who ran a viral animation account. The moderator smiled at her. "Lydia, your story really resonated. Can you tell us why you think your moment in court struck such a chord with people?" Lydia took a breath, fingers gently laced in her lap. "I think it's because we're taught to measure success in ways that are easy to explain: titles, companies, paychecks that come with logos. And when your success doesn't look like that, people assume it isn't real. That it's fragile. Or indulgent." She paused, her voice steady. "But it's not. Building something from nothing, with no blueprint, no approval, no guaranteed safety net, takes more than creativity. It takes stamina. And for me, it wasn't about chasing a dream. It was about surviving, and making that survival beautiful." The room was still. The moderator nodded slowly. "Has anything changed in how you see yourself now?" Lydia smiled faintly. "Yes. I no longer think I need to explain myself in the language of someone else's structure. I used to apologize, for working odd hours, for taking breaks to be with my daughter, for saying no to projects that didn't align. Now I understand that I define the terms of what's enough." A quiet murmur of agreement swept through the room. When the panel ended, people came up to her: artists, young mothers, quiet 20-somethings with shy eyes and sketchbooks tucked into tote bags. One woman pressed her hand to Lydia's arm and whispered, "You helped me quit a job that was killing my spirit." Lydia thanked her, heart tight. Later that night, at home, Lydia and Emma sprawled across the living room floor with paint samples and paper taped to the walls. The mural had become their shared obsession. Emma was determined to get the gradient just right between the night sky and the ocean. Lydia dabbed her brush and said, "I spoke on a panel today." Emma's eyes widened. "Like, you talked? In front of people?" "I did." "Were you scared?" Lydia thought for a second. "A little. But it felt more like standing in the middle of something I already knew. I just hadn't said it out loud yet." Emma nodded solemnly, as if that made perfect sense. They painted in silence for a while, the brush strokes soft and deliberate. Lydia watched her daughter. The way she concentrated, the slight furrow in her brow, the same one Lydia had when deep in a piece. Not everything had changed. Bills still came. Deadlines still pressed. Some nights were quiet to the point of loneliness. But there was a steadiness in the air now, a sense that the floor beneath them, built from love and effort and belief, was finally solid. And when Lydia lay in bed that night, Emma's breathing steady down the hall, she realized she no longer feared being misunderstood, because she understood herself. It came on a Thursday morning, just as Lydia was wrapping up the final touches on a client's animated banner. The subject line read, "Proposal, Teaching Residency, Pacific Northwest College of Art." She stared at it for a moment, unsure if she should click. Her heart picked up slightly. Teaching? At PNCA? It didn't feel real. She opened the message. "Dear Ms. Lane, we've been following your work, both as an artist and a voice in the broader conversation about creative legitimacy. Your ability to articulate the intersection between motherhood, artistry, and entrepreneurship has sparked important dialogue. We'd like to formally invite you to apply for a semester-long teaching residency at PNCA in Portland. The residency would involve mentoring students, conducting a weekly seminar on creative sustainability, and contributing to the development of an interdisciplinary art curriculum. We believe your story, and your work, offers invaluable insight into what it means to thrive as an artist today. Please let us know if you'd be open to a conversation." Warmly, Dr. Melanie Rivera, Dean of Programs, PNCA. Lydia read the email 3 times before exhaling. It wasn't just about the title, residency, or the institution. It was the message beneath it. "We see you. We see value in what you've built. Come share it." She sat back in her chair, watching the light shift across the apartment floor. Emma would be home from school in a few hours. She'd want to celebrate. They might bake that almond cake again. Or do something silly, like paint each other's nails and ruin every towel in the house. But first, she needed to think. She clicked reply, fingers hovering for a beat, then began typing. That evening, as the almond cake cooled and Emma did cartwheels across the living room rug, Lydia finally told her, "There's this school," she said. "An art school. They want me to come teach for a little while." Emma sat up, eyes wide. "Like, with students and books and everything?" "Sort of. More like helping people figure out how to make art and life work together." "Are you gonna say yes?" Lydia paused. "I think I might." Emma tilted her head. "Will you still be here when I get home from school?" "Yes," Lydia said gently. "I'd still work from home. I'd just go to the school a couple times a week. And you could visit." Emma looked at her a moment longer, then smiled. "You should do it. You're good at explaining things. Like that time I didn't understand what taxes were, and you made it sound like a video game." Lydia laughed. That might have been a stretch. But it made sense. That night, after Emma was asleep, Lydia stepped into her studio. She stood at the window for a long time, watching the lights of Portland stretch out in quiet constellations. Her life had once felt like it was on the margins, invisible to institutions. Too soft-spoken for corporate arenas, too niche for mainstream attention. But now, the same qualities that once disqualified her had become her strength, her art, her honesty, her ability to endure. She sat down at her desk, opened her sketchbook, and began drawing not for a client or a deadline, but for the classroom. For the first lesson she might teach. At the top of the page, she wrote, "Lesson 1, there is no right way, only your way." And underneath it, she sketched a small apartment with a big heart, a mother with tired eyes and paint-streaked sleeves, and a daughter chasing stars across the ceiling. The first day at PNCA felt like walking into a new version of herself. Lydia stood in front of a narrow whiteboard, sunlight cutting across the concrete floor of the seminar room. Around her, 10 students sat in a semicircle, sketchbooks in their laps, eyes bright with cautious curiosity. Some were seniors about to enter the real world. Others were first-year students still adjusting to the idea that art could be more than a hobby. She glanced at the clock. 2 minutes until class started. The syllabus she'd worked on late into the night sat printed and stapled in a tidy stack. But she hadn't touched it yet. Instead, she walked to the board and picked up a marker. In big letters, she wrote, "What is real?" Then turned back to the room. "Let's start with that," she said. "What makes something real to you?" A silence followed, as if they were trying to figure out whether this was rhetorical or an actual invitation. Then a girl with dyed green bangs spoke. If you can pay rent with it. Another chimed in, if your parents stop asking when you're getting a real job. Someone else laughed. If strangers want to buy it, not just your friends. Lydia nodded slowly, letting each answer settle. When I was your age, she began, I used to think real meant visible. Something other people could name and recognize. And if they didn't see it, then maybe it didn't count. She looked around the room, but I've learned that what makes something real is your investment in it, your time, your labor, your commitment. Not who validates it from the outside. She saw their eyes shift, heads tilting slightly, the way people look when a truth lands in their chest before it reaches their brain. Your art is real, she said, because you make it. Your practice is real because you show up for it. And the life you're building, however strange or uncertain or nonlinear, is real because you're living it. That opened them. Questions started pouring in. How do you find clients? What if you burn out? What if your style doesn't fit what people want? How do you handle people who don't take your work seriously? Lydia answered everything. She spoke about the early days, commissions for $50, working until 3 a.m., the rejections, the doubt, the loneliness. She told them how she learned to read contracts, track invoices, and say no without guilt. And yes, she told them about court, not the drama, but the clarity, the moment when she stood in a room full of people trained to measure worth by numbers and titles. And showed them something they didn't expect, the power of self-made purpose. After class, a student lingered. She was quiet, maybe 19, with deep brown eyes and a trembling hand clutching a small sketch pad. Can I show you something? The girl asked. Lydia nodded. She flipped open the pad to reveal a series of pencil drawings, delicate, emotional, heavy with unspoken stories. A mother sitting alone on a couch. A girl peeking through a cracked door. A pair of hands holding a frayed rope. They're not polished, the girl said quickly. And I don't know if they're good enough for anything. Lydia looked up. These are more than good enough. They're honest. They're alive. The girl swallowed hard. I want to be an illustrator. But my dad says if I can't explain what I do in one sentence, it means I'm not doing anything real. Lydia smiled gently. Then maybe he's asking the wrong question. The girl looked at her. What's the right question? Lydia didn't hesitate. Does it matter to you? The student blinked, and then something cracked open, not loudly, but just enough to let light in. That night, Lydia returned home to find Emma sprawled on the couch, surrounded by glue sticks and magazine cutouts. What are we making? Lydia asked, dropping her bag. A vision board. Emma grinned. We're supposed to do one for school. I'm putting dreams and goals and stuff. She held up a square of cardboard covered in pictures, a cozy house, a dog, stars, paintbrushes, a book cover that read written and illustrated by Emma Whitmore. You know, Emma said, it used to be hard to imagine the future. But now it just feels like building it. Lydia sat beside her, resting a hand on her shoulder. That's exactly what it is. And as they cut and pasted dreams into something visible, Lydia realized, every time she chose this path, every risk, every sleepless night, every courtroom breath, it wasn't just for survival. It was for this. A daughter unafraid to imagine. A life no longer waiting for permission. Lydia adjusted the camera angle one last time and clicked, join meeting. The ring light above her desk cast a soft glow across her face, just enough to mask the fatigue under her eyes. She'd been up late finishing a set of illustrations. For a children's book, a dream project, one she would have never imagined landing a year ago. The Zoom screen flickered, then populated with square after square, teachers, journalists, librarians, nonprofit leaders, all gathered for a virtual event titled, Mothers Who Create, Voices from the New Workforce. She wasn't the keynote. She was the closing voice. The last speaker before the event wrapped, the one they hoped would leave the strongest imprint, and she knew exactly what she wanted to say. When the host introduced her, Lydia unmuted, took a breath, and began, Hi, everyone. I'm Lydia Lane. I'm a digital illustrator, a teaching resident at PNCA, and the mother of a brilliant 12-year-old girl who once told me I paint like I'm hiding stars in every stroke. A few people smiled. She continued, Last year, I stood in a courtroom where a judge looked at my career, and at me, and said, out loud, in front of my ex-husband and a room full of strangers, that what I did wasn't a real job. She let that sit. It stung. Not because I believed her, but because a small, buried part of me feared she was right. She paused again, eyes steady, but then I opened a folder filled with proof, earnings, contracts, pay stubs. Numbers that spoke their language. And I watched as their assumptions cracked. But the most powerful moment wasn't about numbers. It was when my daughter's voice, echoed through the child advocate, said this, It's not just what my mom does. It's how she is when she does it. She's with me. She's real. She makes things matter. The screen was quiet. She could see it on their faces, that subtle shift when words don't just land, they settle. I've come to realize that many of us are building invisible empires, businesses from our bedrooms, empires from empathy, influence from intention. And we're not asking for permission anymore. Lydia smiled, but it wasn't soft. It was solid. I don't need to prove my job is real. I live the proof every day. In what I create. In how I raise my daughter. In the life I've made by choosing art, not in spite of responsibility, but because of it. She looked into the lens. So if someone ever tells you what you do doesn't count? Show them what it builds. Show them who you become when you do it. The chat lit up with comments and hearts. But Lydia didn't read them. She ended with a final line, written from the center of her chest. Your work is real because you are. She clicked leave meeting and exhaled. That evening. As they cleared the dishes, Emma spoke without looking up. Mom? Yeah? I told my teacher today that you're my role model. Lydia paused mid-swipe of the counter. You did? Emma nodded. I said you make art and money and decisions. And you don't wait for someone else to say you're good at it. Lydia felt something bloom in her chest, quiet and fierce. Thank you, she said. That means everything. Later that night, Lydia opened her sketchbook. She flipped past client drafts and class notes, landing on a fresh page. At the top, she wrote, Chapter 11, Visibility, then she sketched a scene from memory. Emma in the courtroom hallway, clutching Lydia's hand, unaware of what was coming. And beside her, Lydia herself, tired, unsure, but standing anyway. Underneath, she scribbled, the world may not always see us clearly. But we see each other. And that's enough to begin. Summer arrived like a breath held too long. The mural in the living room was finished, sweeping stars melting into waves, the moon stitched with constellations Emma had named herself. This one's called Brave, she said, pointing to a jagged shape in the corner. It's the one you used to carry me through court. Lydia had said nothing at the time, just wrapped her arms around her daughter and let silence speak for her. Now, months later, their life had rhythm. Weekdays were full, school runs, commissioned work, student critiques at PNCA, dinners that started late but always ended with laughter or soft music. Lydia's inbox remained full, opportunities, collaborations, people seeking her voice as much as her visuals. She didn't say yes to everything anymore. She didn't need to. What she needed. She had built. One quiet Sunday morning, Lydia opened a drawer she hadn't touched since the day of the verdict. Inside was the manila folder, faded at the corners, its label long worn. She ran her fingers over it before pulling out the documents one last time. Invoices. Screenshots. Statements, artifacts of a fight she had already won. She tucked them into a larger portfolio and labeled it, for Emma. Because someday, when her daughter faced her own moment of doubt, when the world tried to tell her she wasn't real, or ready, or enough, Lydia wanted her to see this, what perseverance looked like on paper. What resilience earned. What being underestimated could ignite. That afternoon, Lydia took Emma to the Portland Art Museum. It was something they'd started doing once a month, a tradition now. But today was different. Why are you nervous? Emma asked, catching her mother fidgeting with her bracelet. You'll see. They entered a side gallery, newly renovated, quiet, filled with light. A small section in the back had been designated Emerging Voices in Digital Media. One wall was dedicated to Lydia's work. Her name, in simple black font, read Lydia Lane, truth in layers beneath it, 6 pieces. The courtroom sketch. The storm. With a rainbow hiding in it. Emma painting beside her. And 3 new pieces Lydia had made just for this, stories of working motherhood told without apology or filter. Emma froze. You're in a museum, she whispered, wide-eyed. We're in a museum, Lydia corrected. These pieces exist because you did. You've always been the reason. Emma didn't respond with words. She stepped close to the wall, standing in front of the image of herself, head bent in a perfect mix of pride and shyness. Will other people see these? She asked. Lots, Lydia said. And they'll see you. Us. Everything we fought for. They sat on a nearby bench and watched as others filtered into the room, strangers stopping to stare, to murmur. Some took photos. A few cried quietly, moved by the rawness in the art. Lydia didn't look away. She let herself be seen. That night, Emma asked if they could both write something to tuck into the back of the mural, like a secret message. To future us. Lydia handed her a pen. Emma wrote, Dear future me, you were always strong. Even when they said you weren't. Then handed the pen to her mother. Lydia added, and you were always real. Even before the world admitted it. They taped the notes to the wall, then covered them with fresh paint, sealing them behind the stars. A hidden promise. A quiet monument, and that was the legacy Lydia never knew she'd leave, not just art on walls, but something deeper. A blueprint of survival. A record of defiance. A testimony written not in court but in color, in presence, in persistence, because what she built wasn't just a career. Or a case won.it was a daughter raised to believe that realness isn't measured by status or salary, but by integrity, and love, and the quiet, radical courage to show up again and again, even when no one's watching, especially then.